Okay, here we go. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm glad to be here. I'm going to introduce our speaker, Martha Curry. And aren't you up? I was kind of afraid to come here because I kept getting these texts and stuff from people. That Martha Curry, she's the best, and blah blah. I'm like, I'm chopped liver. Am I chopped liver? No, but I know. She set this high bar. Gosh, Brian and I have got to really work at this. But thank you, Martha. And Martha has been teaching for quite a while. I know some people have said, where's she been? Well, she's been hiding with Brian Keeler in those great classes.
Exile land upstairs.
That's right. You have to wander in the desert a little bit. Well, let me pray for us and then we'll get started. Lord, we give you thanks for the words from the book of Daniel. And Lord, may you use it with your spirit and as you mold and meld us into the image of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. Is this thing a little... I'm not sure how that works. Can you hear me? I find that if you just start moving knobs, even though you don't know what they are, they should change something. But anyway, we're going to start with Daniel chapter 5. I'm going to try to move away from that thing. And if some...
It'd be easier to move it.
Oh, that... No wonder we have you.
It's okay.
How about that? That would be good. Let's see if that works.
It should be on the floor, that's the problem. You're getting feedback?
I am getting feedback.
They're supposed to be on the floor.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Okay.
This is your sound technician.
Yeah. We are very low budget when the tech is Karen and myself. So, well, look at that.
Okay.
You're so smart. Daniel chapter 5. Just wondering if some people would read a little bit from it, and then we can talk a little bit about Daniel 5. Don't be shy.
Bob Bell, please read.
Gosh, Bob, thank you.
Come on.
King Belshazzar made a great feast for 1,000 of his lords and drank wine in front of the 1,000. Belshazzar, when he tasted the wine, commanded that the vessels of gold and of silver that Nebuchadnezzar, his father, had taken out of the temple in Jerusalem be brought, and the king and his lords, his wives, and his concubines might drink from them. And they brought in the golden vessels that had been taken out of the temple, the house of God in Jerusalem, and the king and his lords, his wives, and his concubines drank from them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone.
Earl?
Immediately the fingers of a human hand appeared and wrote on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace opposite the lampstand. And the king saw the hand as it wrote. Then the king's color changed, and his thoughts alarmed him. His limbs gave way, and his knees knocked together. The king called loudly to bring in the enchanters, the Chaldeans, the astrologers. The king declared to the wise men of Babylon, "Whoever reads this writing and shows me its interpretation shall be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold around his neck, and shall be the third ruler of the kingdom." And then all the king's wise men came in, but they could not read the writing or make known to the king its interpretation. Then King Balthazar was greatly alarmed, and his color changed, and the lords were perplexed.
The queen, because of the words of the king and his lords, came into the banqueting hall, and the queen declared, "O king, live forever. Let not your thoughts alarm you or your color change. There is a man in your kingdom in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. In the days of your father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, were found in him. And King Nebuchadnezzar, your father, the king, made him chief of the magicians, enchanters, Chaldeans, and astrologers, because of the excellent spirit, knowledge, and understanding to interpret dreams, explain riddles, and solve problems were found in this Daniel, whom the king named Belshazzar. Now let Daniel be called, and he will show the interpretation.
Good. Well, let's stop right there, and then we can finish reading some other stuff. This chapter and the chapter that y'all heard last week go together, right? So last week, can someone give me a quick recap of what happened in chapter 4?
Nebuchadnezzar kind of lost it. He went king crazy, and his kingdom started to fail, and he went into the wilderness, was cast into the wilderness for 7 years, but then he saw the revelation of God, and he came back and he served as better king and understood his place in the universe. He was king, but he wasn't king overall.
Yeah, that's great. He became a vegan, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
Just eating grass and oats and
That's right.
and that just changed his whole demeanor. Yeah, he thought he was it. He said, "This is all my glory. I've done everything. I've made it." And it's kind of like one of those movies we see in Hollywood. Someone who's way up there, works on Wall Street, has it all, and then just falls flat on his face. That's Nebuchadnezzar. And so there's a contrast that's going on. And I'll tell you this, I have read a couple scholars. One of them was my old professor named John Goldengay. And there's another great professor named Wendy Widder, W-I-D-D-E-R, and someone else I forgot. But and they know the old language. They know that it's written in here in Aramaic and in Hebrew, and so they're saying there are words that are used in this chapter that go back and make you think about chapter 4, chapter 3, and so the person that is writing this is not doing it out of coincidence. They are telling the story, and the story here. Do you remember the very first theme that we talked about in the first day? God is sovereign, right? God is sovereign. There's no one else who is sovereign. He is sovereign, and don't forget that. And so Nebuchadnezzar is this king who is humbled. God will humble him. God will make him like a cow until he sees who he is in view of God's glory. And now we have this other king, King Belshazzar. And from what I understand, Belshazzar is not in the direct line of Nebuchadnezzar. Belshazzar is maybe even not blood related. He's a grandson. And there's a span of probably about 20 or 30 years between Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar. And there's a lot of turmoil. There are kings that have come from Nebuchadnezzar, and they get overthrown and things like that. So Belshazzar is like he's probably somebody who's married into the line of Nebuchadnezzar and is king. He's not even really king. His father's the king, but his father is out on a 5-star spa somewhere. He's been there for 10 years, so he's just enjoying himself, right? He has the title of king, but he's retired, right? Just like Brian Keeler, just retired, just spa, and So Belshazzar.
Words in northern Iraq are really.
Yes. I thought you were in the Turk and Caicos. But so Belshazzar is kind of like this co-regent. While his dad is enjoying the spa, he is taking the place. So he also has this great feast. It said King Belshazzar made a great feast of thousands of his lords and this great event that is going on. So he thinks he's something, doesn't he? Right? And so you're going to have this contrast between Nebuchadnezzar and you're going to have a contrast between Belshazzar. And they both make great things. Belshazzar makes a great feast, and Nebuchadnezzar made a what? A great idol, a great statue, right? For everyone to be impressed. And here we have this. So Belshazzar, who tasted the wine, he commanded, and these are important, he commanded the vessels of God and of silver that Nebuchadnezzar, his father, had taken out of the temple in Jerusalem. So in this culture, in this royalty, even though Nebuchadnezzar has been gone for quite a while, he's not really related maybe, he's still called in that lineage of Nebuchadnezzar. So he could call Nebuchadnezzar his father. And guess what? You think he's a little jealous, Belshazzar? Nebuchadnezzar is a great and mighty king. We even know him today, right? When we think of great empires and great kings, Nebuchadnezzar is still known. He is still well known. Belshazzar, we didn't know about until about the mid to late 1800s, before there was some archaeological evidence that there really was a guy like this. So Nebuchadnezzar is the one who built the empire. How do you like to follow those shoes, right? It's tough. It's tough to follow that. And so Belshazzar is providing something incredible, but then he does something very arrogant, doesn't he? What does he do? He takes the things of God and makes them common. The idea of this is that even though Nebuchadnezzar took those things from the temple, in Scripture it's talking about God gave them over to Nebuchadnezzar. God allowed Nebuchadnezzar to take these gold items. And they're not just like, oh, we take them from the altar guild, and altar guild may get on your case for a little bit, but they're not that big of a deal. It is a huge deal, huge deal. And the way kings did, they fought for their gods. And so Nebuchadnezzar was fighting for his God. And he takes stuff from the gods that he conquers. He thinks he conquers Jerusalem. He thinks he takes those vessels that are incredibly sacred, and he removes them and he brings them to his house of gods, and that's where they will reside. It would be an abomination, even in pagan cultures, to take other sacred vessels of other gods and use them as common things like Bob was talking about.
It brings up an interesting question, not to get wonky and off, but Nebuchadnezzar seemed to have at least some respect for the sacredness of the vessel. They were consecrated.
Yeah.
And he took them, but as far as we know, he didn't deconsecrate them. He just put them in a temple
Yeah.
to be
As a trophy or something like
a
that.
trophy or
Yeah.
a treasure,
Yeah.
something of value. This guy devalued them. He treated them
I think so. I think that's what this is talking about. Here you have a mighty, powerful king, and he takes the vessels of gold and silver that Nebuchadnezzar, his father, had taken out of where? Out of the temple in Jerusalem. And he brought, and then the kings and his lords and the wives and the concubines, he brought them so they could just drink out of them. Just drink out of them, like a sippy cup or, one of those red plastic cups we use.
But then they praise the gods of silver, gold, and,
Yeah.
you know,
Then they brought in,
praise idols.
listen to some of the stuff that is repeated. Then they brought in the golden vessels that had been brought out of the temple, the house of God in Jerusalem, and the king and his lords and his wives and his concubines drank from them. They drank wine and they praised the gods of gold, silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. You think God's not doesn't care if he's being mocked? Yeah. How does that always turn out when God is mocked? Not very well, does it? No. And it's very interesting, the wording of it. These are the vessels of gold and silver that Nebuchadnezzar, his father, had taken out of the temple in Israel. Temple's a big thing, temple in Israel, in Jerusalem. But then in verse 3 it says they brought in the golden vessels, just the golden vessels that had been taken out of the temple, the house of God. There's no Nebuchadnezzar. It's taken out of the temple, the house of God, these golden vessels, to be desecrated. And then what happens? Immediately, at that very moment, a hand comes out. Yeah, it's the same word. This immediately is the same word that happens when Nebuchadnezzar will say, I'm the greatest thing that's since sliced bread. And then immediately he's made into a cow, basically, isn't it? Immediately a hand, the fingers of a human hand appeared and wrote on a plaster wall of the king's palace, his temple, opposite the lampstand. Interesting, isn't it? There's places, these scholars I'm reading, there are places in the Old Testament, especially in the Pentateuch, where God's finger writes. And where would that be? It's Charlton Heston, right? Up on the mountain. God's fingers are writing the tablets, right? There's a lot of places it talks about hands, real specifically God's fingers are writing on the tablets. And they don't believe this is a coincidence. They believe this is God fingers that are writing. It would be a little freaky, right? Like the Addams family, the hand comes out. This is something. Yeah, the thing. That's what it was called, thing. This is something.
God's communication.
God's communication, yeah, from all of that stuff.
We have that expression now. People say, "Oh, he saw the handwriting on the wall."
Yeah.
And I've heard that.
You sort of, the handwriting on the wall. But can you imagine? You're in front of thousands of people. You're basically mocking God and trying to show off. I think he's trying to show off in front of everybody that he's greater than this Nebuchadnezzar. Look, Nebuchadnezzar had all this stored up. Watch me. I'm going to take it to another level. And he does. He takes it to another level, and then all of a sudden, God's hand appears. God's fingers will appear. And then there's a writing on this plaster of the wall of the king's palace, king's temple. The same word as palace and temple are the same words. Opposite the lampstand. And the king saw it. We don't know if everybody saw it, but we know the king saw it. Lampstand is important too. It's a huge thing here, right? Bob, where's a lampstand? It's in the Holy of Holies, right? It sits opposite the bread of presence. It is there in the temple. What other vessels are in the temple, in that Holy of Holies? These golden vessels are there. Only these golden vessels. And so these golden vessels that had been taken out of the temple, out of the house of God in Jerusalem. Very interesting. And there Belshazzar sees the hand writing near the lampstand. That's not coincidence either. I think the writer, from what I understand, the writer is saying God is present. He's right here. He's not trapped in some little place. God is in the very presence of all of these people, right? Just like he was with Nebuchadnezzar, making him a cow. He's in the very presence of here. He's not confined. He is sovereign. And so the writing on the hand, the king's color changed. You ever had your, turn white as ash? Yeah, we've done that. His thoughts alarmed him, his limbs give away, and his knees knocked. I think that's a nice way of saying something happened in his pants, right? And his knees shook. And the king called loudly to his enchanters, the Chaldeans, his astrologers, and he wants to know the interpretation. Funny, he didn't call Daniel, does he? Daniel's been around for a while, and Daniel is the chief of all these wise magicians or whatever, isn't it?
It seems almost that he doesn't even know that Daniel exists, but the queen has to come and
Yeah.
say, "This is God."
I wonder if he does know Daniel exists, but he's part of the old regime, right? I think there's a lot of ego here, arrogance, that says, I don't care about Nebuchadnezzar. That's old news. He's nothing. He's nothing compared to me, and I don't need his whatever. And so King Belshazzar, again, is greatly alarmed, and his lords are perplexed. And then this next part, the queen comes. And some people will say this is not his wife because they're already at this wine tasting event, right? And so they think this queen that comes is the queen mother. She's either his mother or she's part of this older generation. And she will speak words to him. The queen, because of the words of the king and his lords, came into the banqueting table, and the king declared, O king, live forever. Let not your thoughts alarm you or your color change. There is a man in your kingdom in whom the spirit of the holy gods. In the days of your father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, were found in him, and King Nebuchadnezzar, your father, the king, made him chief of the magicians. You ever have your mom or mother-in-law make a little sarcastic remark to you? I think there's a little sarcasm here. Oh, king, live forever. There's a guy named Daniel who your father, King Nebuchadnezzar, King Nebuchadnezzar, he used him. He's brilliant. He's incredibly wise, right? Maybe a little dig there. Maybe she's being compassionate. It doesn't sound quite like that. If it's the queen mother, then maybe not. Maybe she's being a little like, you little snot-nosed kid. You think you know it all. You're incredibly very arrogant. But there's one that your father has made chief of the magicians, enchanters, Chaldeans, and astrologers because of his knowledge and able to interpret. And then let Daniel be called, and he will show you the interpretation. Did we read verse 13? I'm sorry, I forgot. No, let's read that. Okay.
Here comes Daniel. Then Daniel was brought in before the king. The king answered and said to Daniel, You are that Daniel, one of the exiles of Judah, when the king my father brought from Judah. I have heard of you, that the Spirit of the gods is in you, and that light and understanding and excellent wisdom are found in you. Now the wise men, the enchanters, have been brought in before me to read this writing and make known to me its impression, its interpretation. But they could not show the interpretation of the matter. But I have heard that you can give interpretations and solve problems. Now, if you can read the writing and make known to me its interpretation, you shall be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold around your neck, and shall be the third ruler of the kingdom.
Wow. Great. I think he does know Daniel here, doesn't he? Right? But he didn't call him Daniel, you're a great wise man. He calls him, you're the Jew we took from Jerusalem, basically, is what he's saying. You're one of those captives.
Notice that he gets titled third in the kingdom.
What's that?
Third in the kingdom.
Third in the kingdom.
Third.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think he's taking a dig at Daniel. You're one of those exiles. Amy?
What happened to his other name?
What happened to his other name? That is very interesting that he calls him by his Jewish name and not by his Babylonian name. Yeah, that's and I don't know the answer to that. Is he again taking a dig at Daniel just for being a Jew, or is he just clueless? I think he knows who Daniel is. I don't think you get to be the top whatever prophet in the kingdom without being known. I think he does that because he wants nothing to do with Nebuchadnezzar's thing.
Well, maybe his Babylonian name was kind of an honorarium in a way, and now 20 plus years have passed. They don't care about that anymore, and it's forgotten, and so he reverts to his.
Yeah, I would not think that part. I would think if you're the top dogs, you call them by what you want to call them. Yeah. So,
Okay.
Brian?
I just want to say one small thing, and that is a lot of this reminds me of the story of Joseph.
It does, doesn't it? There's a lot of stuff that goes along with Joseph. And again, I don't think that's coincidence.
No, I don't think so either.
Yeah, I think there's the writer of Daniel is saying there is someone greater than Daniel, but also that God, just like in the story of Joseph, God is the one who moves the pieces. God is it is a parallel. Yeah. So far, we have this Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar, right? They're both incredibly arrogant, aren't they? Both, from chapter 4 and from this chapter. And then Daniel comes in and he's going to have this long dialogue. Now, if I was Belshazzar, I'd just say, can you just tell me? I don't want to hear, just simple. 2 or 3 words, just simple. And then Daniel answered and said before the king, let your gifts be for yourself, give your rewards to another. Nevertheless, I'll read the writing to the king and make known to him the interpretation. O king, the most high God gave Nebuchadnezzar, your father, kingship and greatness and glory and majesty. How does that sound to Belshazzar? And because of the greatness that he gave him, all peoples, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him. Whom he would, he killed, and whom he would, he kept alive. Whom he would, he raised up, and whom he would, he humbled. But when his heart was lifted up and his spirit was hardened, so that he dealt proudly, he was brought down from his kingly throne, and his glory was taken from him. He was driven from among the children of mankind, and his mind was made like that of a beast, and his dwelling was with the wild donkeys. He was fed grass like an ox, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, until he knew that the Most High God rules the kingdom of mankind and sets over it whom he will. And you, his son Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, though you knew all of this, but you lifted up yourself against the Lord of heaven. And the vessels, get this, and the vessels of his house have been brought in before you, and you and your lords, your wives, your concubines have drunk wine from them. And you have praised the gods of silver and gold, of bronze, iron, wood, and stone, which do not see, or hear, or know, but the God in whose hands is your breath, in whose all your ways you have not honored. And then from his presence the hand was sent, and the writing was inscribed, and this is the writing that was inscribed, many, many, tekel and parsin. This is the interpretation of the matter. Many. God has numbered the days of your kingdom and brought it to an end. Tekel, you have been weighed in the balance and found wanting. Perez, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Whew. How do you like that? Right? Yeah.
Party's over.
Party's over.
I think this is rather interesting in that the messages that were given to Nebuchadnezzar are those of opportunity to repent, to change. This king has no option.
No. Well, he could have if he wanted to, right? Nothing happens after he says this.
Right.
So, and so the historical context, the Babylonian Empire will fade, and the Persians and the Medes will come. This is it. They're at the gates of his city, and he is, for some reason, he's having this big wine tasting event of 1,000 people, while the Medes and the Persians are going to come after him. So part of this is they think he's trying to rely on his gods, and that his gods will, in a last Hail Mary attempt, will make sure that he succeeds. And it doesn't seem that way, right? Especially after he desecrates the vessels.
I think it's interesting that many is used twice.
Yeah, it is interesting.
That is significant.
Now, there's another scholar who will say Belshazzar uses the Jewish vessels because he believes that they're under his gods. And so if he uses them, that these vassal gods will come and protect him. That's another different way of thinking of it. I think he's mocking God and mocking Nebuchadnezzar. That's my view of it. And he does it to do that, which is very interesting because he's about ready to be beheaded or something. Daniel will tell this long story. Daniel doesn't say, okay, let's get to the writings. Let me tell you. Let me tell you about the king who really built this empire. This king had a lot of power. It's not his power, it's God's power. He didn't quite use it like he should have used it. He killed people, he blessed people, he did this to people, he did that to people. And he thought he was it until God humbled him, made him like a cow, kept him eating grass until he repented, right? Until he repented. Nebuchadnezzar was a great king because he understood who the real king is sovereign. He got that, Belshazzar, and you didn't. And for that, your actions are being weighed. You will no longer be on the throne, right?
It's kind of a breakdown of humility. I mean, both in Nebuchadnezzar and this guy.
No. I'm sure being military men, you were always uplifted all the time, right? Oh, Bob, you're, as a private or whatever you were, or a first lieutenant, I'm sure the colonels and generals, oh, Bob, you did great. You're great. Don't, you know. I'm sure as a new surgeon, you got chastised about certain things and things like that. I had Patrick Gahan. Yeah. Think about that. Yeah.
I had it.
They were sitting in this.
Yeah, and Darlin Donna.
It just seems like Daniel was saying, pay attention here. This is what happened. This is your opportunity to open your eyes and get a clue.
I think so.
I'm giving you this history because wake up.
Yeah, exactly.
And this guy's like,
Yeah.
So why did you call him in for the interpretation if you're not going to listen to what he has to say?
Well, maybe he thought something good. Oh, the Persians decided not to come, and you're safe. Or I don't know, but it's something that makes him lose all his muscle control, and he calls upon those that he thinks have the ability to do that. So when again, this is a contrast between Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar. And what does Nebuchadnezzar do? He repents. It takes a while, but his hard heart becomes softened. This guy, who's really done nothing to make him king, except he was born in the right place, has all the power and has all the arrogance and all of that. And he will hear Daniel's story about those who came before him and who the real God of heaven is, right? And what happens to Belshazzar? Like you said, nothing. He says nothing. He does nothing. He just lets it go, doesn't he? And then what does he do? He gave the command, and Daniel was clothed in purple. A chain of gold was put around his neck, and a proclamation was made about him that he should be the third ruler of the kingdom. Yay! Because Daniel has already told him, you've been weighed in the balance and found wanting. Your kingdom is divided and will be given to the Persians and Medians. Oh, great. I get all the purple robe, right? And I get this. They're worth nothing, right? Like Italian lira or the Confederate money, after the war, it's worth nothing. You have zero. And Daniel's like, yeah, okay, that's great. Can you see some of the contrast between Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's interesting to me that all of a sudden he believes Daniel. He's listened to all these other people before and kind of poo-pooed their interpretations. And after listening to Daniel, as you'll read on, he was the truth. He's the one that told him the truth.
Yeah, it is. It's a fascinating story, and it tells of a God who's sovereign, right? But it also brings up some other questions.
One thing, it makes him third in the kingdom. He's not willing to break the line of succession.
Yeah, that's right.
Daniel does not get a place in the royal palace. He's third.
Yeah.
And he's the guy outside looking in.
Yeah.
I find it interesting that he told him this horrible prophecy, so to speak, and then he turns around and rewards him. Is he mocking him, or is he saying, I don't believe you, I'm going to give you this, just go away?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I don't know. I think he is rewarding him, but the reward is really nothing.
So I think sometimes these guys, I mean, there's other Bible stories too like this with the beheading of John the Baptist, where somebody who's supposed to be really powerful makes a public statement about what he's going to do. I'll give you anything, you know, just all you got to do is ask.
Yeah.
And here he's publicly said, I'll give you the robe, I'll give you the chain, I'll make you number 3. And now it's like, okay, I guess I have to do it, because
Yeah.
if I don't do it, I'm going back on my word in front of all these people. So I don't
Yeah.
think
He was also giving him nothing.
well, that's true.
Pretty much, he was.
Darius is sitting outside the walls.
Yeah. And it says, that very night Belshazzar, the Chaldean king, was killed, and Darius the Mede received the kingdom, being about 62 years old. Now here's something, from what I've read from these scholars, they think this 62 has some relationship to the writing on the wall of the many Tekel Perez stuff, that they're both symbolic of each other, right? In other words, if you're going to say somebody's thing, that this King Darius, he's around 60, he's around 70. It's a little odd to be specific about a certain number. He's around 62. They think it's related to this, in that Darius is this many thing, and all that kind of stuff relates to the number of 62. And so that Darius is the prophecy of that God has placed Darius to be the one that weighs the kingdom and will take over the kingdom from Daniel, right? So, few things to think about. Daniel's getting to be an older person. He's been there at least 20 or 30 years away. He's a captive. They're in exile. He sees God move. He's seen God move in a lot of ways. He's seen that these temple vessels, in the very presence of God, they were used. They're a covenant reminder that God is in covenant with the Hebrew people, Daniel himself, and that God is not mocked. That God is, even in the presence of all these false gods, shows himself as being sovereign, right? If it was me, and I've been captive for 30 years, I'd be like, "Ooh, that's very powerful. I'd like to go home. I'd like to see my family." But Daniel didn't do that. And God doesn't give him a reason why. There's nothing that really well, there sort of is, in the book of Daniel later on. But God doesn't really give him a reason why. You're still here. I've still got plans for you. I called you here. You stay here. I'm God. I love you. I won't abandon you. But this is where I've called you. The book of Daniel isn't written to just give us, fiery furnace and Daniel and the lion's den and all these fun little stories we can tell our kids. It's written to a group of people that are now either have been in exile or being brought out of exile into a culture that has always been burdened or persecuted or something like that. I think this is an incredible picture of who God is. God's a God of this process, or I don't know how to put it. He's not here to make you famous or to have you have a house in Beverly Hills and life is really well. No one gets cancer, no one dies. Your life is beautiful. You're always 20 years, blonde hair, blue-eyed, all that kind of stuff. That's not the picture here. This is a picture of God who is always with his people, even when it doesn't seem like it. I mean, I can't imagine being held captive for that long. Even though I'm in a place of power, it's a story of this endurance of who God is. It's a picture like John the Baptist wondering, I've been faithful, I'm saying the things you've called me to say, and yet I hear them sharpening the axe for my neck. God works in great strength and extravagant stuff, and God works in great weakness and great suffering too. I don't like that part. I like the other part. But this is the book of Daniel is really important. And thank Brian. He's the one that picked it. I was going to pick something like Obadiah or something like that. But yeah, there's time for that. What do you think? What do you think about the contrast of these two powerful people?
I mean, that's God's sovereignty too. So in the case of Nebuchadnezzar, he humbled him, and when Nebuchadnezzar finally came around, he restored him. In the case of Belshazzar, who also needed to be humbled, he humbled him and he killed him. I mean, that was it.
Yeah.
Which is God's prerogative to do. So it's like our job to tell God, oh, that's not fair. You should have given him a second chance too.
God brings in another king from another culture.
Another king, the guy is eligible for Social Security.
Yeah, exactly, right? he's an older guy.
62 years old. He can go.
But God's like, oh man, I better find somebody else to. He's not confounded by that. I mean, and there are prophecies, and I forgot which book of the Old Testament that talks about the Persians and the Medes that will come over Babylon. Is it Isaiah? Yeah, God's not mocked. God's like, no, trust me, I got this. Yeah, and there will be other people that will come in. God continues all of that. That's an enduring thing.
God is consistent.
God is, He's faithful. Mm-hmm. He is faithful, very much so. So, any other questions? It would be interesting for us to think about, am I Nebuchadnezzar or am I Belshazzar? How do I respond to God when He really wants to get my attention about who He is and who I am? I'm Belshazzar a lot of times. I even seen the writing on the wall. I'm like, it's okay. Yeah. So there's a lot to this.
Hang over it.
Yeah.
Just go home and make sure and take directing the river away from your house.
That's right. That's right. If you see a hand just writing, you be careful.
Scott, I'm concerned at this point. You, as a clergyman, obviously felt a call from God. Probably maybe didn't have handwriting on the wall, but whatever it was, you sensed it and responded to that. That
Well,
call comes to all of us in some way.
and some need a 2x4 to hit them on the head, and some people get. I needed a couple 2x4. I was a banker, if y'all didn't know that, and I thought, man, I'm doing well, I'm rising well, and that wasn't where God wanted me. And you hear of people, I mean, they could be in Iraq, ministering to people in a village, and they could be one of the smartest people around, but they could be working on Wall Street. But God has them in different places. I mean, Martha sees that, and y'all see that in different places of the world. This is where God has called me. And it's paradise to me because God is right here with me, right? I could be the most miserable person on Fifth Avenue and have all the accolades, but I would be terrible because that's not where God has me. Yeah. All right. I think that's it. Next week is Brian, chapter 6. And we will see y'all next week. Thanks for coming in the rain and all that. I appreciate it.